The thunderous crack of a whip split the air over Willowbrook, Montana in 1871, but few in town would have guessed it was striking Petunia Parker's back rather than her horse's. 22-year-old Petunia hurried through the general store, keeping her shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders despite the summer heat. She smiled at folks who greeted her, answering with rehearsed pleasantries while carefully selecting items from the shelves: sugar, flour, coffee, and a small jar of honey. She needed to be quick. Vernon wouldn't tolerate her being gone long. "Good morning, Petunia. How are you holding up today?" Mrs. Adams, the shopkeeper's wife, asked as she tallied the purchases. "Just fine, thank you," Petunia replied, her voice soft but steady. She'd become skilled at hiding pain beneath polite conversation. "And how is Mr. Blake treating you? You two still settling in all right after the wedding?" Petunia's smile tightened. "Vernon is quite particular about the way he likes things. I'm still learning." 3 months of marriage to Vernon Blake had taught Petunia many things: how to cook his eggs exactly the way he wanted, how to speak only when spoken to at social gatherings, and how to explain away the marks on her body when someone caught a glimpse. Bruised ribs from falling off the porch steps. A black eye from walking into a door, a split lip from tripping over the rug. "Well, dear, if you ever need anything," Mrs. Adams trailed off, her eyes filled with concern she wouldn't voice. "I'll be fine," Petunia insisted, gathering her purchases. "Good day now." She stepped back into the harsh Montana sunlight, her petite frame casting a long shadow across the dusty main street. Petunia had once been vibrant and full of laughter. The daughter of a successful rancher, she'd grown up with dreams of love and family. Vernon Blake, 15 years her senior and a successful businessman who'd moved to town just a year ago, had courted her with charm and promises. Her father, impressed by Vernon's wealth, had encouraged the match despite Petunia's hesitation. The honeymoon had lasted precisely 3 days. Petunia's steps slowed as she approached the Blake house at the edge of town, an imposing 2-story structure that felt more prison than home. She checked the position of the sun. Vernon would be back from his business at the bank soon, and dinner needed to be ready. As she climbed the porch steps, a voice called out, "Miss Parker, or I should say Mrs. Blake now." Turning, Petunia saw a tall figure on horseback pulling up to her fence. Her heart quickened as she recognized Kieran Thorne, the new ranch hand working at her father's spread. They'd barely exchanged words before her marriage, but she recalled his kind eyes and easy smile. "Mr. Thorne," she greeted, clutching her packages tighter. "What brings you to town? Your father sent me with a letter for you." He dismounted gracefully, pulling an envelope from his vest pocket. As he approached, his blue eyes narrowed slightly, studying her face. Petunia realized too late that the heat had caused her to loosen her shawl, revealing fingerprint-shaped bruises along her collarbone. She quickly adjusted the fabric, but Kieran had already seen. "Thank you," she said hastily, taking the letter. "Please tell my father I'm well." "Are you?" Kieran asked, his voice low and gentle. He stood a respectful distance away, but his gaze was penetrating. "Of course," Petunia replied, the lie familiar on her tongue. "Marriage is simply an adjustment. Adjustments shouldn't leave marks," he said carefully. Petunia's face flushed. "I'm clumsy these days, always bumping into things. I remember you riding fences and breaking horses on your father's ranch. You were never clumsy." His words hung in the air between them. For a moment, Petunia felt seen, truly seen for the first time in months. The sound of approaching hoofbeats shattered the moment. "I should go," she said quickly. "Thank you for the letter." Kieran nodded, his expression troubled as he returned to his horse. He tipped his hat. "Good day, Mrs. Blake." Petunia hurried inside, heart pounding. Vernon would be furious if he found her speaking with another man, especially one young and handsome. She quickly set to preparing dinner, trying to push thoughts of Kieran Thorne from her mind. But as she worked, an unfamiliar emotion stirred inside her, not hope exactly, but perhaps the first whisper that her situation wasn't invisible to everyone. Kieran Thorne rode back to the Parker ranch with troubled thoughts swirling through his mind. At 26, he'd seen his share of hardship since leaving his home in Texas after the war. He drifted through several territories before finding work with James Parker 3 months ago. The man was fair, the work honest, and Montana's rugged beauty appealed to Kieran's restless soul. He'd met Petunia just once before her wedding, a brief encounter when she'd come to help her father with the ranch books. Her laughter had caught his attention, bright and genuine as summer lightning. The woman he'd seen today bore little resemblance to that vibrant young lady, Thorne. "How'd the delivery go?" James Parker called out as Kieran approached the ranch house. "Fine, sir," she seemed. Kieran paused, choosing his words carefully. "Your daughter seemed tired." Parker's weathered face creased with concern. "Vernon keeps her busy with social obligations." "That's what comes with marrying a man of means." Kieran nodded, unwilling to voice his suspicions to Petunia's father without more certainty. "I reckon that's so. You're heading into town for supplies tomorrow. Check on her again, would you? Maybe bring her these preserves Sarah made." Parker gestured to several jars his housekeeper had prepared. "I'd be happy to," Kieran agreed, perhaps too quickly. The following day found Kieran back in Willowbrook, the preserves carefully packed in his saddlebags. He'd finished the ranch errands early, timing his visit to the Blake house when Vernon would likely be at work. As he approached, he saw Petunia in the garden, kneeling among rows of vegetables despite the sweltering heat. She wore long sleeves and a high collar despite the temperature. "Mrs. Blake," he called softly, not wanting to startle her. She turned quickly, a brief flash of fear crossing her features before recognition set in. "Mr. Thorne, what brings you back so soon? Your father sent preserves," Kieran explained, lifting the package. "May I?" She nodded, and he opened the gate, crossing to where she knelt. As he handed her the jars, his eyes caught something she couldn't hide, a ring of dark bruises circling her wrist like a macabre bracelet. Petunia saw where his gaze had fallen and quickly pulled her sleeve down. "I appreciate the delivery, Mrs. Blake." "Petunia," Kieran said, lowering his voice. "If you're in trouble, I'm not," she interrupted, rising to her feet. "Please don't concern yourself. Your wrists tell a different story than your words." Petunia's composure faltered. "What would you have me say, Mr. Thorne? That my husband has a temper? That I've discovered marriage isn't the fairy tale I imagined? What good would speaking such things accomplish?" "It might be the first step toward help," Kieran suggested gently. "There is no help," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not for a married woman. This is my life now. It doesn't have to be. Doesn't it?" Her eyes met his, filled with a bleak resignation that made his chest ache. "The law gives a husband rights over his wife. The church says I must honor and obey. Where exactly would help come from, Mr. Thorne?" Kieran removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair. "From people who can see what's happening isn't right. No one sees, or if they do, they look away. It's easier." "I see," he said simply. A complicated emotion flickered across Petunia's face, fear mingled with something that might have been hope. "You should go," she said finally. "Vernon could return early." Kieran nodded, replacing his hat. "I'll be in town through tomorrow. If you need anything at all, send word to the hotel." He turned to leave but stopped when she called after him. "Why do you care? You barely know me." Kieran looked back. "Because no one deserves to live in fear, not you, not anyone." After he'd gone, Petunia stood motionless in her garden, the weight of his words settling around her like evening mist. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to imagine a different life, one without constant terror, without walking on eggshells, without lies to cover bruises. But such thoughts were dangerous. Vernon's possessiveness was absolute. He'd made it clear what would happen if she ever tried to leave. That evening, Vernon returned home earlier than usual, his mood darkened by business troubles. He criticized the dinner she'd prepared, complained about the dust on the mantel, and finished a bottle of whiskey before the sun had fully set. "Who was visiting today?" he asked suddenly, his words slurring slightly. Petunia's hand froze mid-motion as she cleared the table. "Visiting." "Don't play stupid," Vernon snapped. "Mendoza at the feed store mentioned seeing a cowboy at our gate, one of your father's hands." "Oh, yes," Petunia said, keeping her voice steady. "Mr. Thorne brought preserves from the ranch. He stayed only a moment." Vernon's eyes narrowed. And did you enjoy entertaining this cowboy while I was working to provide for us? He only delivered a package, Vernon. There was no entertaining. The slap came without warning, sending her stumbling against the table. Don't lie to me, Vernon growled. Did he enjoy looking at you? Did you smile for him like you used to smile for me? No, Vernon, please. The second blow knocked her to the floor. What followed was worse than usual, Vernon's jealousy fueling his rage. When he finally tired and stumbled off to bed, Petunia remained curled on the kitchen floor, tasting blood and shame. As moonlight streamed through the window, she made a decision. She couldn't endure this life any longer, not even one more day. If death was to be her fate, she'd rather meet it trying to escape than waiting for it to find her in this house. Moving silently despite her injuries, Petunia gathered what little she could, a change of clothes, her mother's brooch, the meager savings she'd hidden beneath a floorboard. She wrote a brief note to her father, explaining without detail that she couldn't stay with Vernon, and asking forgiveness for her departure. Then, in the deepest hours of the night, Petunia Parker Blake slipped from her prison and fled into the darkness. Dawn found Kieran already awake in his rented room at Willowbrook's modest hotel. Sleep had eluded him, his mind filled with concern for Petunia and anger at what was clearly happening behind closed doors. He'd seen similar situations before, women trapped with brutal men, communities that turned a blind eye. He was preparing to head back to the ranch when an urgent knock came at his door. Mr. Thorne. The hotel proprietor's voice was strained. There's a situation you should know about. Opening the door, Kieran found the older man looking troubled. What is it? It's Vernon Blake. He's gathering men to search for his wife. Says she ran off in the night, stole money from him. He's making quite a scene in the street. Kieran's heart raced. Is he now? Thought you'd want to know since you work for her father. Thank you, Kieran said, reaching for his gun belt. I appreciate the warning. Outside, morning sun illuminated a tense scene. Vernon Blake stood in the center of the street, red-faced and wild-eyed, gesturing as he spoke to the town sheriff and several other men. She's obviously not thinking clearly, Vernon was saying. Delicate female constitution, she needs to be brought home for her own protection. We'll find her, Vernon, the sheriff assured him. Couldn't have gotten far on foot. Kieran approached slowly, careful to keep his expression neutral. Morning, gentlemen, seems there's trouble. Vernon's head snapped around. You're the cowhand who visited my wife yesterday. I delivered preserves from her father, Kieran confirmed calmly, and filled her head with notions, I'll wager, Vernon snarled, advancing toward him. What did you say to her? Kieran stood his ground. Nothing that would cause a happily married woman to flee in the night. A dangerous silence fell over the gathering. The sheriff stepped forward. Now, let's all calm down. Mr. Blake is concerned about his wife's safety. That's natural enough. Is it concern that drove her to run barefoot into the night? Kieran asked, his voice carrying clearly. Or was it the same concern that left bruises around her wrists and throat? Vernon's face contorted with rage. You lying bastard, my wife is clumsy, everyone knows that. Mighty specific pattern of clumsiness, Kieran replied, falling in ways that only a hand could cause. The sheriff looked uncomfortable. Thorne, these are serious accusations against a respected businessman. Ask the doctor if he's treated her, Kieran suggested. Ask Mrs. Adams at the general store if she's noticed. Ask anyone who's looked past what they want to see. Vernon lunged forward suddenly, grabbing Kieran's shirt. You put ideas in her head. You're probably hiding her right now. Kieran didn't flinch. I wish I was. I'd make sure she never had to fear a man's touch again. With a roar of rage, Vernon swung a fist toward Kieran's face. The cowboy ducked easily, stepping back without retaliating. That's enough, the sheriff barked, moving between them. Blake, control yourself. Thorne, I suggest you head back to the Parker Ranch before this gets worse. I'll be heading there shortly, Kieran agreed. But first, I think Mr. Parker deserves to know what his son-in-law has been doing to his daughter. Vernon's face paled slightly. James Parker was still a formidable man with considerable influence in the territory. This is a private matter between a man and his wife, Vernon insisted. Not anymore, Kieran replied. Not when she's fled into the wilderness to escape you. As tensions escalated in town, Petunia huddled in the shadows of an abandoned trapper's cabin 3 miles into the foothills. She'd walked all night, pushing through pain and exhaustion, terror driving her forward whenever her steps faltered. Her face was swollen, ribs aching with each breath, but the physical distance from Vernon gave her a fragment of peace she hadn't known in months. She knew she couldn't stay. Vernon would search, and this would be an obvious hiding place. She needed to reach the next town, perhaps find passage on a stagecoach heading east, but first she needed rest. Curling into the most protected corner of the dilapidated structure, Petunia finally surrendered to exhaustion, her dreams filled with pursuit and fear. Hours later, the sound of approaching hoofbeats jerked her awake. Panicked, she pressed herself deeper into the shadows, scanning the cabin for anything she might use as a weapon. A rusted trap was the only possibility, and she gripped it with trembling hands. The door creaked open slowly. Petunia held her breath. "Mrs. Blake, Petunia." The voice wasn't Vernon's, but Kieran's. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by fresh fear. "How did you find me?" she asked, still clutching the trap. Kieran stepped fully into the cabin, his expression softening at the sight of her. Even in the dim light, her injuries were evident, her left eye swollen nearly shut, dried blood at the corner of her mouth, dark bruises visible where her dress had torn. "Your father mentioned this place once, said you used to come here as a child." His voice was gentle. "The whole town's looking for you, but in the other direction. Vernon has them convinced you headed toward the railway station." "He'll kill me if he finds me," Petunia whispered. "I won't let that happen." Kieran knelt a few feet away, respecting her space. "Your father knows now." "I told him everything I'd seen." Petunia's eyes widened. "You told him?" "He deserved the truth. He's half mad with guilt for encouraging the marriage." Kieran hesitated. "He's coming with the doctor, but they're taking a longer route to avoid Blake's search party." "I came ahead to make sure you were safe." "I can't go back," Petunia said, panic rising in her voice. "Vernon will find a way, he always does." "Not this time," Kieran assured her. "Your father's already speaking to the territorial judge." Vernon Blake's influence has limits, especially against evidence of what he's done. As if sensing her doubt, Kieran slowly removed his coat and extended it toward her. "You're shivering. Please take this." Petunia hesitated before accepting the garment, wrapping it around her shoulders. The warmth and faint scent of leather and pine was comforting. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice small. "First, we get you to safety and medical care," Kieran said. "Then, it's your choice. Your father would welcome you home. Or if you prefer distance from Willowbrook, I know good people in Helena who would help. And Vernon will face consequences one way or another." Something in his tone made Petunia look up sharply. "I don't want more violence, not even for him." Kieran's expression softened. "Your kindness, even now, is remarkable." He moved to the cabin's single window, checking the surrounding forest. "Your father and the doctor should arrive soon. Can you tell me what happened last night?" Petunia's hands twisted in her lap. "He heard about your visit. He was angrier than usual." "I'm sorry," Kieran said, genuine regret in his voice. "I never meant to make things worse." "You didn't," Petunia assured him. "This has been building for months. If not your visit, he would have found another reason." They fell silent for a moment, the only sound the gentle rustling of pine needles outside the cabin. "I never thanked you," Petunia said finally. "For what? For seeing me. For not looking away like everyone else." Before Kieran could respond, the sound of approaching riders reached them. He moved to the doorway, hand on his pistol, until he confirmed it was James Parker and Dr. Wilson. The reunion between father and daughter was emotional. James Parker falling to his knees beside Petunia, tears streaming down his weathered face as he saw her injuries up close. "My girl, my dear girl," he repeated, his voice breaking. "I had no idea. I should have known." "It's not your fault, father," Petunia insisted, though her own tears fell freely now. "Doctor." Wilson examined her with careful hands and grave expressions, confirming 3 cracked ribs, extensive bruising, and a sprained wrist among her injuries. "She needs proper rest and care," the doctor concluded, "but nothing that won't heal in time. She'll have it," James promised. At home where she belongs. As they prepared to depart, taking a circuitous route back to the Parker ranch, Kieran pulled James aside. Blake won't give up easily, he warned. Men like him don't accept losing what they consider their property. I've already sent word to Judge Hamilton in Helena, James said grimly, and I've hired extra hands to patrol the ranch. Vernon Blake will never touch my daughter again. I'd like to stay on, Kieran offered, at least until things are settled. James studied the younger man, noting the protective glances he cast toward Petunia. I reckon that would be wise. She trusts you. The journey back to the Parker ranch was tense but uneventful. They avoided the main roads, taking trails through the foothills where search parties wouldn't venture. By nightfall, they had Petunia safely installed in her childhood bedroom, with Sarah, the housekeeper, fussing over her and preparing healing poultices. Kieran established himself on the porch, rifle across his lap as darkness fell. He had no intention of sleeping. Vernon Blake struck him as a man who would act rashly when cornered, and the night held too many shadows. His vigilance proved warranted shortly after midnight, when the sound of approaching horses broke the stillness. Kieran rose silently, moving to alert the two ranch hands who were also keeping watch. 4 riders approached the main house, Vernon's bulky silhouette unmistakable in the moonlight. Kieran stepped forward as they reached the yard, his rifle held casually but ready. That's far enough, Blake, he called out. Vernon reined his horse to a stop. I've come for my wife, Cowboy. This doesn't concern you. She's not your wife anymore, Kieran replied steadily. Judge Hamilton has already been shown evidence of your treatment of her. He's issued a writ of protection. Papers don't mean anything out here, Vernon snarled. Step aside. No, the standoff stretched taut as a fiddle string. Behind Vernon, his companions shifted uncomfortably. You willing to die for her? Vernon asked, his voice incredulous. Are you willing to die trying to hurt her again? Kieran countered. The front door opened behind him and James Parker stepped out, shotgun in hand. Blake, you're trespassing on my property. I suggest you leave while you still can. She's my wife, Vernon shouted, his control slipping. I have rights. Not to beat her half to death, James replied coldly. Not to terrorize her. The doctors documented every mark on her body. The law's on our side now. One of Vernon's companions cleared his throat. Vernon, maybe we should head back. Talk to your lawyer tomorrow. Shut up, Vernon snapped, his hand moving to his holstered pistol. I'm not leaving without her. The moment hung suspended, violence a breath away, then a soft voice spoke from the doorway. Is this what you want them to see, Vernon, what you really are? Petunia stood in the doorway, her face clearly visible in the lamplight, every bruise, every cut a testament to Vernon's cruelty. Look at what you've done to me, she continued, her voice gaining strength. Is this the respected businessman of Willowbrook, the gentleman everyone admires? Vernon's companions stared at Petunia's battered face with dawning horror. She's clumsy, Vernon insisted, but his voice lacked conviction. Always falling, no woman falls in the pattern of a man's fingers, one of his companions said, backing his horse away. Jesus, Blake, what have you done? You can't hide it anymore, Petunia said quietly. I won't hide it for you. Vernon's face contorted with rage. With a sudden movement, he drew his pistol. If I can't have you, the crack of Kieran's rifle split the night. Vernon's pistol flew from his hand, blood spraying from his shattered fingers. He howled in pain and outrage. Next one won't be so merciful, Kieran warned, already chambering another round. Decide now if this is the hill you want to die on. Vernon clutched his bleeding hand, hatred blazing in his eyes, but his companions were already retreating, unwilling to die for a man whose true nature had been revealed. This isn't over, Vernon spat before yanking his horse around and galloping away. Kieran maintained his position until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he lower his rifle and turn to Petunia, who stood trembling but upright in the doorway. You stood your ground, he said softly. That took courage. I'm tired of being afraid, she replied. Tired of hiding. As the adrenaline of the confrontation faded, Petunia swayed slightly. Kieran moved quickly to her side, offering his arm for support. She accepted it without hesitation. Let's get you back to bed, James said, his voice gruff with emotion. We'll deal with tomorrow when it comes. As Kieran helped Petunia inside, their eyes met briefly. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, that while the night's dangers had passed, the real healing had only just begun. The next weeks brought significant changes to Willowbrook. Judge Hamilton arrived from Helena to personally review Petunia's case, bringing with him a federal marshal. After examining Dr. Wilson's detailed documentation of Petunia's injuries and hearing testimony from several townspeople who had suspected but never spoken about Vernon's abuse, the judge granted an unprecedented legal separation. Vernon Blake, facing both legal consequences and social ostracism as the truth spread, sold his business interests and left Montana Territory altogether. Rumors suggested he'd fled to California, but no one in Willowbrook particularly cared where he went as long as he stayed away. For Petunia, recovery came in small, painful steps. The physical injuries healed faster than the invisible wounds. Nightmares plagued her sleep. Unexpected sounds made her flinch. Trust came slowly, hard-earned through consistent gentleness from those around her. Throughout it all, Kieran remained at the Parker Ranch. Initially staying on as extra security, he gradually became indispensable, skilled with the cattle, clever with repairs, respectful of Petunia's need for space while remaining a steady, reliable presence. By the first snowfall, Petunia had begun to rediscover pieces of herself that Vernon had nearly destroyed. She rode again, tentatively at first, then with growing confidence. She kept the ranch books alongside her father, her sharp mind for numbers undiminished. She even laughed occasionally, a sound that made Kieran's heart lighten whenever he heard it. They developed a careful friendship, built on small conversations and shared tasks. Kieran never pushed, never presumed, but he remained constant, a presence she could count on without demands or expectations. One crisp December evening, Petunia found Kieran in the barn, repairing tack by lantern light. She stood watching him work for a moment, admiring the careful precision of his hands. "You don't have to stay, you know," she said finally. Kieran looked up, surprise evident on his face. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No," Petunia said quickly. "That's not what I meant, just Vernon's gone. The danger's past. You could move on if you wanted to." Setting aside the bridle he'd been mending, Kieran studied her thoughtfully. "Is that what you think I'm waiting for it to be safe enough to leave?" Petunia shrugged, suddenly uncertain. "Most cowboys don't stay in one place long. Especially not for a winter." "I'm not most cowboys," Kieran said simply. He hesitated, then added, "Unless you'd prefer I went." "No," Petunia admitted, her voice soft. "I've grown accustomed to having you here." A smile touched Kieran's lips. "High praise indeed." "You know what I mean," she chided gently. "I do." His expression grew more serious. "And for the record, I stay because I want to be here, not out of obligation or concern." Something warm unfurled in Petunia's chest at his words. "Oh." They fell silent, the only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the barn rafters. "I'm going to start decorating for Christmas tomorrow," Petunia said finally. "Father's invited half the county for Christmas Eve dinner. I could use some help gathering pine boughs." "I'd be honored," Kieran replied. As winter deepened, so did the connection between them. They moved carefully, both acutely aware of Petunia's recent trauma. But shared work and quiet conversations gradually built something neither had expected, a deep friendship that held the potential for more. Christmas Eve brought a house full of neighbors, good food, and cautious celebration. Petunia, wearing a new green dress that complemented her auburn hair, moved among the guests with growing confidence. Many had initially been skeptical of her claims against Vernon, but as the evidence became undeniable, the community had rallied around her. Late in the evening, as guests began departing through the gently falling snow, Kieran found Petunia alone on the back porch, wrapped in a heavy shawl as she gazed at the star-filled sky. "Too crowded inside?" he asked, keeping a respectful distance. Petunia nodded. "I needed a moment of quiet." "It's still overwhelming sometimes, being around so many people." I can leave you be, he offered. No, please stay, she said, surprising them both with her quickness. Your company doesn't tire me the way others do. Kieran leaned against the porch railing, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Highest compliment I've ever received. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken only when Petunia spoke again. I never properly thanked you, she said quietly. For what? For seeing what others wouldn't, for believing me. She turned to face him fully. For being the first person who looked at my bruises and didn't make excuses for them. Kieran's expression grew solemn. You never needed to thank me for that. Any decent man would have done the same. But they didn't, Petunia pointed out. Only you, their eyes held, the moment stretching between them with unspoken possibilities. Petunia, Kieran began carefully. I want you to know that the back door opened suddenly, spilling light and the sound of conversation onto the porch. There you are, James Parker exclaimed. Sarah's serving the Christmas pudding, can't start without you too. The moment broken, they returned inside to join the festivities, but something had shifted between them, a recognition of feelings that could no longer be easily dismissed. Spring came to Montana with its usual tumult of mud and renewal. The Parker Ranch bustled with activity as calving season arrived, keeping everyone working from dawn to dusk, and sometimes through the night. Petunia threw herself into the work alongside the ranch hands, her strength and resilience returning more fully with each passing day. One warm afternoon, in late April, Petunia found herself alone with Kieran, checking fence lines in the north pasture. They worked comfortably together, Kieran repairing broken posts while Petunia held the wire taut. I've been thinking, Kieran said as he tamped earth around a newly set post. A dangerous pastime, Petunia teased, a lightness in her manner that had been absent during the winter months. Perhaps, he agreed with a smile, but necessary sometimes. Petunia handed him the hammer, and what thoughts have occupied this necessity? Kieran hesitated, suddenly serious. Your father offered me a permanent position yesterday, foreman, starting next month when Bill retires. Did he? Petunia's hands stilled on the fence wire. And what did you tell him? That I'd need to think about it. I see. Her voice was carefully neutral. And have your thoughts provided an answer? Kieran straightened, facing her directly. That depends on you, Petunia, her pulse quickened. Me. Why would your decision depend on me? Because I wouldn't want to stay if my presence made you uncomfortable. His blue eyes held her steadily. These past months, watching you heal, seeing your strength return, it's been a privilege, but I recognize that I'm also a reminder of a difficult time. Is that what you think? Petunia asked softly. That when I look at you, I see those days, don't you? Even a little, Petunia shook her head, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. No, Kieran, when I look at you, I see the first person who believed me. The man who stood between me and harm without hesitation. Her voice grew softer. The person who taught me that not all men's hands are meant to hurt. The air between them seemed to still, the sounds of the ranch fading into the background. Petunia, Kieran said, his voice rough with emotion. I would never presume to, I know, she interrupted gently. You've been careful, respectful, perhaps too much so. She took a small step closer. I'm not made of glass, Kieran, not anymore. Kieran's expression shifted, hope warring with caution. What are you saying? I'm saying that if your decision to stay depends on me, then stay. Another step closer. Stay because I want you to, not because you feel obligated to protect me. Slowly giving her every chance to retreat, Kieran extended his hand, palm up an invitation, not a demand. Petunia placed her smaller hand in his, the simple touch more meaningful than any passionate embrace could have been. I'd like to court you properly, Kieran said, if you'd allow it. I would like that very much, Petunia replied, her smile genuine and unguarded. Their courtship progressed with deliberate care throughout the summer months. Kieran was patient, attentive to Petunia's boundaries and respectful of her ongoing recovery. For her part, Petunia discovered joy in rediscovering intimacy without fear, the simple pleasure of holding hands, the gradual comfort of physical closeness, the thrill of their first tentative kiss beneath a harvest moon. By autumn, their relationship had deepened into something neither had expected to find: a partnership based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and growing love. On the anniversary of her escape from Vernon, Kieran took Petunia riding to a beautiful overlook above the ranch. As the golden light of late afternoon bathed the landscape, he turned to her with uncharacteristic nervousness. "A year ago today," he began, "you made the bravest decision of your life. You chose freedom despite the cost." Petunia nodded, memories of that night still sharp but no longer debilitating. "I remember thinking I might die trying to escape, but that even death would be better than one more day of living in fear." "You're the strongest person I've ever known," Kieran said, taking her hand gently. "And every day since then, I've watched you reclaim yourself piece by piece." "Not alone," Petunia reminded him. "You've been beside me through all of it, and I want to remain there if you'll have me." Reaching into his pocket, Kieran withdrew a simple gold band. "Not as your protector or savior, you've proven you don't need either, but as your partner, your equal, your yes," Petunia interrupted, tears of joy gathering in her eyes. "The answer is yes, Kieran." "I haven't asked the question yet," he pointed out, a smile breaking across his face. "Then ask it so I can say yes again." Kieran knelt, still holding her hand. "Petunia Parker, will you marry me, not because you need me, but because we're better together than apart?" "Yes," she said again, her voice strong and certain. "With all my heart, yes." Their wedding took place on a perfect June day the following year, with wildflowers decorating the small church in Willowbrook. The entire community attended, many still carrying guilt for having ignored Petunia's suffering, all celebrating her renewal and happiness. As Petunia prepared in the church anteroom, her father came to escort her down the aisle, his eyes suspiciously bright. "I failed you once," he said gruffly. "Pushed you toward a man who hurt you. I won't ever forgive myself for that." "I have forgiven you," Petunia said gently, straightening his tie, "and I've forgiven myself for not being stronger sooner." "You've always been strong," James insisted, "and Thorne knows it. That's why I trust him with you." "I trust him too," Petunia said, her smile radiant. "With everything I am." The ceremony was simple but meaningful, their vows written to reflect the unique journey that had brought them together. When they spoke of honor and respect, the words carried the weight of hard-earned understanding. When they promised to cherish and protect, everyone present knew these weren't empty sentiments but proven commitments. As Kieran slipped the ring onto Petunia's finger, he added words not in the traditional ceremony. "I promise to see you, truly see you, every day of our lives together." Tears slipped down Petunia's cheeks as she responded with her own addition. "And I promise to stand strong beside you, never behind you or beneath you." Their first kiss as husband and wife wasn't tentative or cautious, it was a declaration, a celebration of all they'd overcome and all that awaited them. The years that followed brought challenges, as all marriages face, but also deep joy and fulfillment. When James Parker retired fully, Kieran and Petunia took over management of the ranch together, their complementary skills making them successful partners in business as well as life. Their first child, a daughter named Hope, arrived on a snowy December night 2 years after their wedding. A son, William, followed 18 months later. Both children grew up knowing their mother's story, not the details of her suffering, but the truth of her courage and resilience. Occasionally, Petunia would encounter someone who remembered Vernon Blake, usually a traveling businessman passing through who'd known him in other territories. She never hid her history, but spoke of it matter-of-factly when necessary. The shame, she'd learned, belonged to her abuser, not to her. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Kieran surprised Petunia with a special gift, the deed to the small trapper's cabin where he'd found her that fateful night. He'd quietly purchased the land and restored the structure, creating a peaceful retreat where they could escape the busy ranch occasionally. "I wanted to reclaim it," he explained as they approached on horseback. "Transform it from a place of fear to one of happiness." Inside, the once dilapidated shelter had become a cozy haven with a stone fireplace, comfortable furnishings, and windows that framed the magnificent mountain views. "It's perfect," Petunia whispered, turning in a slow circle to take it all in. "Like you," Kieran said, drawing her into his arms. Later, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson, Petunia rested her head against Kieran's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" she asked. "If you hadn't noticed my bruises that day, if you'd looked away like everyone else," Kieran's arm tightened around her. "Sometimes, it terrifies me to think how close we came to never finding each other." "I believe we would have," Petunia said with quiet certainty. "Perhaps not as quickly or easily, but our paths were meant to cross." "Such faith," Kieran murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Not faith," Petunia corrected. "Experience, every trial has led to something better. Every scar has made me stronger." She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the last light of day. "Every moment of pain led me here, to you, to our children, to this life we've built." "And was it worth it?" Kieran asked, his voice hushed. "The suffering?" Petunia considered his question seriously before answering. "No suffering is ever worth it in itself, but finding the strength to overcome it, that's worth everything." Her hand found his, fingers intertwining in the familiar pattern of a decade's intimacy. "And finding someone who sees you, truly sees you even at your most broken, that's beyond price." As darkness gathered around their mountain retreat, they remained together on the porch. Two people who had found in each other not salvation but partnership, not rescue but mutual strength, and through that discovery, a love that continued to deepen with each passing year. In Willowbrook, the story of Petunia Parker and the cowboy who believed her when no one else would become something of a legend, passed down through generations as a reminder that sometimes courage comes in the simple act of seeing what others refuse to acknowledge, and that love, real love, begins with truth.